Big Bird is doing fucking wheelies! So last year it turned out I was actually 24 hours late for Valentine's Day, and now St. Patrick's Day has snuck up on me. If I owned a calendar, I'd be way more prepared for these things. The good news is that I had a parade to remind me of the occasion, so there's just enough time to cobble something together if I start right now. It wouldn't be like me to let Paddy's Day slip by without making a special Irish video to celebrate, but without a proper plan, I'll just have to dig through the emergency box and see what I can work with, not a chance. I could probably get a minute and 10 seconds out of this. This just got a lot more interesting. St. Patrick's Day means that our proud nation gets to make international headlines for the day. This time for something that's not lighting the Lewis on fire. And Ireland absolutely deserves the spotlight, being a country that tends to punch above its weight in many respects. We have a staggering amount of talent here. Cillian Murphy, Paul Mescal, Saoirse Ronan, Iowa Debris, Barry Keoghan. For every Enoch Burke and Conor McGregor in this country, there's a Brendan Gleeson and Katie Taylor. And considering the small population of our humble island, it has one hell of a portfolio. Ireland is world renowned for its unique culture, music and literature, but I feel like our lesser known projects don't get the credit they deserve. The Banshees of Inisherin was one of the highest rated movies of 2022 and finally exposed Pat Short to the world of Hollywood. But how many people on the Academy can tell you a thing or two about Dan the Man Clancy? Today I'd like to dig a little deeper into Ireland's artistic output, shine a light on some Irish media that you don't see discussed as often as Father Ted or Normal People, and explore the full spectrum of Irish creativity. I found a few things in the emergency box. Before I show you everything I scraped out, I should probably stop dressing like a complete looter. That's better. Let's set the scene. You're at home sick from school, and you're watching some daytime programming on RTE while you recover. 9 times out of 10, the shows offered by RTE will replace your common colds with tuberculosis. But if you're lucky, you'll be treated to a game show that makes Takeshi's Castle look like child's play. For my generation of Irish kids, after-school TV didn't get much better than this. Quizone was an intense gauntlet that combined athleticism and general knowledge under a strict time limit, pitting 3 teams of 5 kids against each other to take home a prize and lifelong bragging rights. If somebody told me they won a game of Quizone when they were a kid, they'd be the last person I'd ever fuck with, I'll tell you that much. The game takes place inside this colourful soft play zone in Kildare known as the Play Barn, and the contestants represent the blue, red or yellow team. 4 members of each team stay in the search room, while 1 member is designated as a runner. A general knowledge question is asked in each round, so it's up to the crew in the search room to find the answer. Available to them is a computer with a heavily nerfed Quizone search engine, and a bunch of books covering all kinds of topics. The runners start at the contact station where they can communicate with their team. They take different routes racing to the top level of the play barn, and slide back down to where they started, in hopes that their team will have sourced the answer by then. Keep in mind that it only takes about 40 to 50 seconds to get through the zone depending on which route you take and your speed and technique, so that's some intense time pressure for the team. Of course, the quicker you get through the zone, the more points you can potentially receive. And there's also a bonus ball at play that'll earn you some extra points. But none of that is worth a damn if your team can't find the answer. If they do find it, they simply relay it to the runner, who then leaves the zone and stands at the finishing position. And if they don't have a clue, well, that's where the drama starts.
You just type in Isle of Man.
Isle of Man. It's up there, ISLE of Man.
The referee Jamie Darling asks each runner for an answer, and whoever gets it right brings back the points for their team. Rinse and repeat until everybody's had their turn as a runner, and the winning team will each take home an MP3 player. No surprises there. It's a TV game show for kids from the late 2000s. If the prize isn't a Nintendo console, it's gonna be an MP3 player. And the highest ranked team of each season also wins a laptop, which is a pretty sweet deal. I'm surprised none of them have been auctioned off by previous winners on eBay. I'd burn a month's wages on one of those if I could. What I love about Quizone is that it is completely played straight. Jamie Darling takes his role deathly seriously. Not a smile or wink to be seen. And the commentator is every bit as dedicated. The material is just kids from Roscommon going down a slide, but he acts like he's calling the last few minutes of a World Cup final. So it was perfectly fitting that as viewers, me and my friends treated Quizone like an actual sports league. We pledged allegiance to a certain colour, and that was it. We supported that colour each episode regardless of where the team members were from. I was a blue team guy myself, and I'm still ready to throw hands with anyone who tries to besmirch their good name. Quizone never tried to be funny because it didn't need to. The comedy came naturally by just throwing the kids into this high pressure environment and letting them fight amongst themselves. It feels like these guys never get the answer on time, and sometimes the runners will get lost, flustered, and just start glitching. It's funny when things go wrong in Quizone, but honestly, it's a formulaic game show for kids, so as soon as the nostalgia kick wears off, the show gets kinda stale except for the occasional funny moment. It would be more entertaining if the contestants could cut a good promo, but they're nervous kids making their TV debut. They're not exactly gonna light the world on fire with their mic skills. And the fun facts about the runners are incredibly basic things you'd tell the examiner in your Irish oral. Michael has a dog, Jacob had chickenpox last year, Katie likes TV. Yeah, and I have a nose. I absolutely still respect Quizone and think we need more young people's programming like this, but when I see people who grew up with the show calling to bring it back, I think they're all talk. The production company that worked on Quizone made every episode available for free on their website, so go ahead and try to binge a few episodes without getting bored, I dare you. Just like I did, you'll spend a few minutes experiencing a nostalgia overload, reminiscing on those old memories, then you'll wonder why you don't just open a new tab and watch Better Call Saul instead. And on a separate note, if you're like me and you know somebody who was on the show, they're embarrassed about it and believe that the footage is lost media, let them know there's no escaping it now. Or you could just play it at their wedding or funeral without warning. It's up to you. I doubt anybody my age would actually show up to watch it beyond tweeting about it once or twice, but I'd love for the show to reach a new generation. Another staple of daytime TV for Irish kids in that era was Roy, a show that combined hand-drawn animation with live action. Roy O'Brien is the 11-year-old cartoon son of Bill and Maura from Dublin. And yeah, he's their biological son. I'm not even going to question what happened in the fucking bedroom that night. The show is a mockumentary about the life of Roy, who can't seem to go one day without getting himself into trouble at school. From a production standpoint, I'm really impressed by this show. In terms of animation, compositing, rotoscoping and motion tracking, it's incredibly well done. And there are so many scenes that make me think it must have been a nightmare to work on, but they knock it out of the park every time. It always feels like Roy actually exists within this universe. Putting that aside, unfortunately, Roy bores me to tears. I was never really that into it when I was younger, and for this video it felt like a chore to rewatch. I do enjoy the principal, he's definitely the highlight of the whole thing, but this show just screams daytime TV. The presentation, overacting and sound effects make it hard for me to sit through it. I find myself just fixating on the production work, thinking about what the editing timelines look like. It also doesn't help that Roy's sister is a brat who makes Peppa Pig look like an angel sent from above. A prequel series called Little Roy premiered in 2015, because you're not a true cartoon character if you don't get a baby spin-off. I had never even heard of this, and at a quick glance, it looks like everything I disliked about the original is dialed up to 11. Overall, I love the idea of Roy way more than I like actually watching the show. It's possible that Roy would be well received by its target demographic if RTE aired a few repeats, but kids these days are on a diet of skibbity toilet and never-ending slop on YouTube shorts. Sadly, I don't think they'd care for the show any more than I do. Maybe I'm just tired of the animated character in the real world trope, and I'd prefer something a bit more traditional. So let's take a look back at 𝗎𝗂𝗧𝗏, The Adventures of Pigglywinks. This cartoon ran from 2003 to 2007, and I had to rack my brain to remember anything about it before looking it up. I have it compartmentalized right beside the magic roundabout. Obscure kids media with freaky, uncanny valley animation that I have to search online to confirm was actually real, and not just a weird dream I had. There's not much to say about this one beyond affirming that it wasn't a figment of your imagination. It's just a decent cartoon for toddlers at the end of the day. In each episode, an elderly Pigglywinks tells his grandchildren stories from his youth, and we flash back to his adventures with his friends Danon and Fernie. Like any good show for kids that age, there's always a wholesome life lesson, but what sets this one apart is just how Irish it is. It's not great to look at with its mid-2000s CGI Polar Express ass animation, but it's fun to listen to.
Oh, Jenny Mac!
Yeah, the characters have some of the thickest Irish accents you've ever heard, mostly played by American actors, so it nearly feels like a piss take sometimes. That doesn't apply to the voice actor for young Pigglywinks himself though. He's voiced by Miley Flanagan, who you may also know as the voice of Naruto in the English dub. How's that for vocal range? There are some surprising names in the credits here, like Brendan Gleeson and Mel Brooks. That kind of star power in a low-budget Irish cartoon for babies is unreal. It would be like getting Conan O'Brien to host Quizone. Just like the first two shows we discussed, 𝗎𝗂𝗧𝗏 is very good for what it is, and you can get the occasional laugh from it. I give it a big thumbs up for filling that void of representing rural Irish life in a kids show, and it was clearly well loved by its audience, but I'm not exactly gonna sit down and binge the series today for my own enjoyment. Honestly, I'm getting pretty tired of talking about shows for 5-year-olds that aren't as entertaining as I remember them being, so I say we mix things up a bit and take a look at a legendary program with an 18+ rating. Telly Bingo. Now here's one for the adults in the room. Possibly the second most prolific TV show in Irish history behind RTE News, Telly Bingo has been on the air since September 21st, 1999, originally airing twice a week, before bumping that up to 3 times a week because the nation just could not get enough of bingo on the telly. You'd be forgiven for thinking that no Irish company's TV offerings could hold a candle to the Sunday game, but leave it to the National Lottery to create a show that's arguably even more gripping than the GAA's magnum opus. Some people will tell you that Telly Bingo was a game exclusively played by the elderly, and that I cannot argue. I actually planned on making a standalone video about Telly Bingo way back in 2018, and when I looked up the program on Google, one of the related searches was, "Hello Google, could I have today's Telly Bingo results please?" Which speaks volumes not only about the main demographic of this show, but also about how many people were searching for Telly Bingo results. It doesn't seem to be the most popular show in existence, but it clearly does enough business to justify airing every single Tuesday, Thursday and Friday at 12:45 sharp on RTE1. The fanbase may not be very vocal online, but they're still getting the hang of Facebook, so you've got to give them a few more years. When I watch recent episodes of Telly Bingo, one thing that stands out is the consistency of the format, the music and the graphics. Ever since 2011, the overall look of the show has remained identical, because how do you improve on abject perfection? It's like time traveling back to when I played the game nearly every week as a kid with my grandmother. Yeah, that's right, I'm nostalgic and sentimental for Telly Bingo. You have a problem with that? There's also no change in presenters, as Declan Buckley has been a mainstay on the show since 2001, and honestly, I'm just shocked that he hasn't been there since the very beginning. He's a core part of Telly Bingo's identity. Those first 2 years without him must have been like the first season of Always Sunny without Danny DeVito. From his debut up until 2004, Declan presented as his drag persona Shirley Temple Bar. And man, can you imagine if that was the case in 2025? Mick O'Keefe would tweet that RTE is trying to sexualize the sacred act of TV gambling. It would get 89,000 likes, mostly from bots and lobotomized Yanks. Elon Musk would quote tweet it, and libs of TikTok would incite 17 bomb threats against RTE studios. Sure, back then there were a few threads on boards.ie with language that would make Hitler cry, but if somebody uses their family computer in 2002 with a dial-up connection to complain about the host of Telly Bingo with strangers on online forums, their life holds as much value as the average rat you see on the street, so pay no mind. Apparently, back in June 2002, we had a once-off special guest presenter in Agnes Brown, because God forbid I could enjoy anything without that bollock sticking her nose in it. That's what they should have been bitching about on the message boards. There are a few different mini-games in each episode of Telly Bingo. 4 corners, the X game, and of course the lucky line right at the end. But if you want to make serious money, then you'll be aiming to mark off every single number on your ticket to earn that elusive snowball prize. You can laugh at my Telly Bingo fascination all you want, but when you're locked in, 2 or 3 numbers left on your ticket, a few hundred people getting closer and closer to victory, money on the line, this game is no joke. We do have fun here as well though, with Declan's iconic bingo calls such as Legs 11 and 2 little ducks quack quack that he's recited in every episode without fail for as long as I've been alive. A handful of times between my original Telly Bingo phase as a kid and my second phase during the early months of lockdown, I got sickeningly close to taking home the prize. I was almost tempted to buy these tickets in bulk and put an end to the cock teasing once and for all. I've won a bunch of lucky lines, which is basically an easy consolation prize that you'll almost always use to exchange for new tickets, and I've gotten the occasional 4 corners, but despite my dedication, I never scored the big one. It was never really about the money when I was a child though. It was all about just sharing that experience of playing the game with my grandmother and making those lifelong memories. But whenever I play now, it's absolutely about the money. I'm completely relying on this fucking game to afford a down payment on a house. Key to the door, my arse, Declan. What do you think €23 will get me with these prices? Weirdly enough, Telly Bingo isn't even the only barely discussed Irish TV show that's had a strange personal impact on my life. It shares that distinction with an animated series you've likely never heard of. Premiering in 2011, Punky follows the daily shenanigans of the titular character and her family, with a major focus being Punky's Down syndrome and how she overcomes the challenges that come with it. It's a very sweet concept and was groundbreaking at the time, as it was the first cartoon to ever feature a character with Down syndrome in the lead role. It's great to see that unprecedented representation, especially when it's handled with such care. And the show isn't just carried by what it achieves in that department, because it is genuinely hilarious. The main cast of the show includes Punky, her mother, her brother Con, and her grandmother who they affectionately call Cranky. And I swear, Cranky is the star of the show. My youngest sister loved watching Punky in 2014, and it caught the attention of everybody else in the family because we always found ourselves laughing at everything that Cranky had to say. Any little inconvenience in her life would trigger her catchphrase, "What is the world coming to?" Rain outside, the kids running past her, everything had her questioning the state of the world, no matter how trivial. Slowly but surely, we started to get more into the show, to the point where we'd gather around the TV whenever it was on and watch full episodes just to hear Cranky's latest rants. So my family got a few weeks of half-ironic enjoyment from this obscure preschool cartoon. Big whoop, what's the personal significance? Well, shortly before my sister got us into this show, she started badgering my parents that it was time for us to get a new dog. Punky's dog is called Rufus. So of course, when the day arrived a few weeks later, she decided we had to name him Rufus. And the little bastard is still tormenting me to this day.
But it's supposed to play some classic songs from a live. Shut up, Rufus.
August 2014 was pretty eventful when I think about it. The Ice Bucket Challenge, meeting Rufus for the first time, and my first and only trip to Tayto Park. I love the 𝗕𝗃𝗧𝗏 coaster in particular, and overall, Mr. Tayto's theme park completely surpassed my expectations. It's just a shame that I couldn't say the same thing about his book 5 years prior. This thing left an even worse taste in my mouth than his manky chocolate bar. Mr. Tayto, the man inside the jacket.
I suppose it's better than Mein Kampf.
I remember seeing this advertised on the Late Late Show, and as a fan of Mr. Tayto's work in the crisp industry, I just had to get it for Christmas. I really don't know what I expected, but it's just a boring autobiography that gives Mr. Tayto a bland life story as he rattles on about his family and other completely uninteresting shite. There were some bits I enjoyed in all fairness. A few pages about how Taytos are made in the factory, his presidential campaign, and an entire section reflecting on Mr. Tayto's era of being a horny bastard online. Aside from that though, I just have to wonder who this was even for. I have no idea who would say this is one of their favorite books.
Genghis Khan?
It actually makes me question Mr. Tayto's entire legacy, to be honest. I'm starting to think he's a total fraud who's good for nothing. Can't make an edible chocolate bar, can't write a good book. Well, he was my first exposure to tits. Alright, you're good for something. And yeah, I enjoyed his theme park, but he failed to keep ownership of that, so I'm not heaping too much praise on him. Even his crisps are completely outclassed by King, Spuddies and Walkers in my opinion. But you know who's a man that'll never badmouth Mr. Tayto? Killinaskully was another fixture of my childhood. Probably not ideal for my development, to be honest. This show is the brainchild of Pat Short, and much like Mrs. Brown's Boys, was panned by critics while it was on the air. None of those critics went on to star in an Oscar-nominated film though, so who really won in the end? In the quaint Irish village of Killinaskully, you'll meet plenty of eccentric characters, and you may notice an uncanny resemblance between every second person you meet. But there is nobody more esteemed than the local Guinness drinking, storytelling, dole collecting Dan Clancy. He is the heart of the show and easily its funniest character. That's not a knock on Jimmy and Timmy, mind you. They're gas bastards as well. But anytime I watched Killinaskully, I was always watching for Dan the man. I never really gelled with the side characters all that much, and I think the show drags an awful lot when it focuses on them. I did enjoy Dieter Langer, a German fella who's always seen in his van selling cheese and sausages. We've had the second season on DVD for as long as I can remember, and I randomly decided to binge it one day in the summer of 2019 for some reason. It was fine, but the episode I adored when I was young and would constantly replay on TV is the heist from season 5, and I still think it holds up fairly well. Dan the man is outraged that he hasn't received his dole payment in 8 long weeks, and he calls himself a loyal customer of 30 years to the social welfare office, which might be one of my favourite jokes in any TV show ever. He confesses that he's actually been committing fraud for 15 of those years, claiming in 2 villages for a non-existent wife and 3 kids, Huey, Dewey and Louie. He declares that he's going to follow in the footsteps of his forefathers and seek greater fortunes elsewhere, by emigrating to England and signing on to the dole over there instead. He sends Jimmy to post the letter for him, but a minute later, he finds out that his dole has been reinstated. Now he has to stop Jimmy from doing what he asked, so he borrows Dieter's van and rushes to the post office. He doesn't make it on time, so now he has to plead with the postmaster at Bally Post Office to get the letter out. Keep in mind that Bally is enemy territory, the eternal sworn rivals of the fine folks of Killinaskully, so drastic measures have to be taken. It's time to pull off the ultimate heist, so Timmy buys colourful leggings to conceal their faces. They call themselves Mr. Green and Mr. Pink, and yeah, this has all just been an excuse to tell you one of my most embarrassing stories. When I was 10 years old, I may or may not have been dared by my friends to run into a local corner shop with leggings over my head after school, calling myself Mr. Green and jokingly demanding free sweets. Sure, they thought it was hilarious, but that genuinely keeps me up at night and almost makes me regret having ever watched this show. Killinaskully has actually slipped a few phrases into my vernacular as well, most notably looter and I must go strain the spuds. Looter is basically another word for 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓, and as you can imagine, poor Timmy is on the receiving end of this insult most of the time. Jimmy isn't let off the hook either. That heist episode ends with the reveal that the letter wasn't sent because he never put a stamp on the envelope. These lads are the perfect sidekicks for Dan the Man. No wonder he comes across so intelligent when he hangs around with these two goons all the time. I also have to give this trio credit for getting me into pink snacks. It nearly makes up for the leggings incident. Even before researching for this video, Killinaskully is a show I'd occasionally return to, and unfortunately I have the most boring take imaginable. Overall, it's okay. It never comes close to the heights of Father Ted, but it's also nowhere near the lows of this bullshit. It makes me laugh occasionally, but the episodes themselves can be fairly inconsistent except for this one. It's definitely carried by the main cast, but I do find that Pat Short strikes gold on occasion and makes this show worth the occasional rewatch, even if you have to endure a bit of shite at times. RTE started airing Killinaskully repeats at the start of lockdown, back when we needed Dan, Timmy and Jimmy more than ever. They didn't exactly fulfill my request, but I did tune in for a few episodes at the time and I enjoyed revisiting it. But surely if they can bring Killinaskully back to the airwaves, they can do the same for a show that was never even afforded a home release. The Morbegs. Let me tell you about my fond memories with this show. Yeah, so I only learned about the Morbegs in 2021, and I was shocked it took me that long to hear about it for the first time. But then about a year later, I was flicking through my baby book and I discovered that it was apparently one of my favorite TV shows. So I did grow up with the Morbegs. I was just so young that I don't remember any of it. Just like Jakers, for those who watched it as kids, it seems to exist as a hidden memory locked in a vault somewhere deep in our brains. It only aired for a year and a half in the late 90s, with reruns until 2008. It was never released on VHS or DVD, and online you'll find less than 10 full episodes and a few short clips. Most of this footage only surfaced in recent years. Before that, it was almost lost media entirely. The Morbegs is a weird one, because it's so obscure that it circles back around to being widely talked about online, as everybody's asking each other if they remember anything about it. There's more online discussion about the Morbegs than anything else I've covered today. And unfortunately, that means Rule 34 claims another victim. There really are no exceptions. So what's the show actually about? I'm asking you. I've watched everything available online and I'm still trying to figure it out. Molly and Russa are two puppets from the magical Morbeg land, and it begs the question, why is Ireland so obsessed with puppets on TV? The Morbegs, Bosco, Zig and Zag, Podge and Rog, Micheál Martin, Dustin the Turkey. We have a puppet empire that could nearly put Jim Henson's to shame. Molly and Russa live in a castle with these wizards, but they often head out for random activities. Some episodes feel like scenes from the Alive-O DVDs, and they're every bit as trippy. In saying that, the characters themselves are nowhere near as horrifying as some people make them out to be. I think they're lovely. They look like they should be mascots on the front of a cereal box. Ross's voice is a bit off-putting, but I can get over it. He's just a young fella who's finding his way in life. As the younger sibling, he's usually the one learning the lessons. You're never too big to enjoy whatever you like. It's not about winning as long as you have fun.
Yeah, if you're a little bitch.
There's an episode where Russa wants to wear a pink dress, with the message being that gender norms in clothing are outdated, and you can simply wear whatever you like. I'm surprised the Burke family didn't break into the fucking castle. It's a nice little show, and if I was to take a guess, I'd say I probably did love it when I was 2. And you know what I'm gonna say next. I'm not exactly hooting and hollering at a show made for babies at the age of 25, but there is a lot I appreciate about the Morbegs. The fact that it's Irish gives it an automatic advantage over anything else on kids TV in my view, and that applies to everything else in this lineup as well. It doesn't matter that I don't find them entertaining as an adult, I'm not supposed to. We loved these shows as kids, so they did their job as far as I'm concerned, filling a crucial role of giving us age-appropriate shows made by Irish people, about Irish people, for Irish people. We're so used to watching imported media from America, England and beyond, that it's nice to see our accents, language, dialect, and our culture in general represented in these shows. I really don't need my future kids catching an attitude from Peppa Pig, Or even worse, a British accent. And I could do without raising a child who calls this a trash can. So you know what? I think I'm just gonna play episodes of Jakers for them on a constant loop whether they like it or not. The moral of the story is that there's a lot more depth and complexity to Ireland than the annual paddywhackery would have you believe. Our country isn't defined by tacky green slop and stereotypes, and it certainly isn't defined by whatever the hell this was. There's even a lot more to us than our most famous, essential works of art. We're capable of producing abysmal dog shit just like everybody else. In all seriousness, while the quality of what we reflected on today was fairly hit or miss, there's a unique charm to each and every one of these obscure little Irish oddities, even if they're not exactly masterpieces in their own right. So if you're at a parade and you see a few Yank tourists with 1.9% Irish heritage acting like experts on all things Ireland, make sure you interrogate them on what they know about Telly Bingo and Quizone. Anyone who can't name the referee can piss off back to Minnesota.
Ireland's a strange little country that produces even stranger creations, but I love it all the same, and I'll always be proud to be Irish regardless of the date. However you feel about living here, just remember it can always be worse. At least you're not American. Also, I must have been too loud when I mentioned Shirley Temple Bar and the Morbegs, because now Enoch Burke and his family are outside. I'm probably stuck with them until the end of time, and there's nothing left in the emergency box except for... It's the only f***ing way to escape them.